Today, Alejandro brought us a message on Parashat Metzorah, taken from Leviticus 14:1 to 15:33. This week's Parashat Metzorah is one of the most detailed regarding how to treat various bodily processes that are natural, such as illnesses, secretions, etc., and are considered to be impure. The book of Vayikra in general, particularly this parasha, not only deals with sources of impurity, but also details the treatment of the most diverse means of purification. The Torah describes the procedure for the Metzorah. That is, the Metzorah is the person afflicted by tza'arat, which is a skin disease, after completing the required period of isolation. This process spans a week and involves offerings, korbanot, and immersions, mikveh, after which the Kohen can declare the Metzorah pure or clean. Someone who's poor may substitute animal offerings, which are too expensive, for less expensive ones. The Torah details the bodily secretions that make a person ritually impure, preventing them from coming near any holy articles, and how to regain the state of ritual purity. Before the Kohen would diagnose a house as having tza'arat, the household items had to be removed to prevent them from also being declared ritually unclean. The tza'arat is removed by demolishing and rebuilding that section of the house, and if it reappears, the entire building had to be razed, which means brought down. Me'an Lopez, as well as our own Rabbi, told us that the word Metzorah is an abbreviation of Motzi Shem Ra, referring to Lashon Hara, which is the evil tongue, or gossip, or slander, the consequence of which is a skin disease. A person who speaks Lashon Hara is considered to have violated all 5 books of the Torah. We see the phrase Torah of the disease or Torah of whatever repeated 5 times in chapters 13 and 14. There's a very interesting teaching in chapter 14, verse 4, that specifies that cedar wood, the tallest of trees, and hyssop, the shortest of bushes, should be used in the purification process. Cedar symbolizes strength and excessive pride, while hyssop, which in Hebrew is ezov, symbolizes humility and can also mean moss that grows between the stones and on walls, representing the lowest on the social scale, or bone, or a person lacking material strength. Our sages agree that the Metzorah must break his rigidity and compare himself to the modesty of the hyssop or the moss. He should regard himself as being like a small piece of cedar wood, not the great cedar itself. This would encourage him to consider changing his attitudes and modifying his behavior. And when that happens, he will be healed. The misuse of the tongue to gossip or to harm others in any way, many may not recognize as sin. They don't realize that they are sinning when they speak ill of another person. The one who does this is making himself superior to the other. Speech that ridicules another person is Lashon Hara. When we speak negatively about someone, even if what we say about them is true, if it is not intended to correct or improve that person, it is Lashon Hara, regardless of how it's communicated, whether by face-to-face, by letter, phone, email, or even through our body language. Exercising self-control over what we say is vital, as is the ability to respect and love others. Here are 2 sayings from the Talmud, from Arachin 15b and the Pirkei Avot, which is the ethics of our fathers. A person's tongue is mightier than the sword. The sword can only kill someone who's close by. The tongue can kill someone who is far away. Lashon hara kills three people: the one who speaks, the one who listens, and the subject who is spoken of. Although it is true that changing our habits of speech is very difficult, as it is written in Mechilta Yitro, all beginnings are difficult. It's also true that the person who really wants to do God's will applies the following from the Talmud in Shabbat 104. He who comes to purify himself receives help from heaven. There are two forms of humility. The first happens when we're suffering pain or poverty. These two can break our spirit and have us feel less arrogant as we recognize our vulnerability. But this is only temporary, because this humility will probably end as soon as the suffering ends. True humility, however, comes when we are aware of our own insignificance in comparison with God's infinite greatness. Why is Lashon hara considered to be such a great crime? We can make up for any harm done to someone simply by asking for their forgiveness, but we can never accurately measure the damage done by Lashon hara, nor the intent with which it was carried out. One of our Talmudic sages said, "If I had been on Mount Sinai when the Torah was given, I would have asked for two mouths, one to tell what I have studied in the Torah, and the other to use in my daily speech," meaning that the slanderer has not distinguished between the noble and the perverse speech. He destroys with his tongue instead of building up. The worst of all is when this attitude is committing Lashon hara becomes part of our garments, wrapping us as tzara'at, leprosy, wrapped in the Metzorah. It can become so much a part of our lives that it's almost impossible to get rid of, because it has become a habit. It has changed our way of speaking. We might think at times that if we speak Lashon Hatov, the good tongue, good words, when we're with other people in our social circles, we won't be accepted. And we're afraid of rejection. But that is choosing the wrong path. Our ability to speak is the quality that defines us as humans. No other living being has the capacity to communicate as eloquently, as creatively, and as sensitively as we can. Our words possess a near cosmic force that can shape the universe. God created the universe with his word. He created the natural world with words. And so we, who are made with his divine spark within us, can also create or damage the social world with our words. We can no longer say, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." Words can cause emotional injuries that are just as painful as physical ones. As I mentioned before, the Metzorah must be humble before he can be healed. He must go through the entire purification process described in detail in this parasha. The comparison of this with the process of teshuvah is evident. The purification process that takes place in the body of the Metzorah is parallel to that of his soul. Rambam, Rabbi Maimonides, spoke of the purity that can be acquired through the mikvah, the immersions, into the waters of knowledge that allow an individual to overcome his bad habits and transgressions. We can see the process of purification for the Metzorah as a detox, which his soul had to go through to eliminate all aspects of his negativity. With this in mind, we can understand why Shemirat Halashon, keeping our word, is so important in the Torah. We often speak and act without being aware of the effect of what we say or do. They have power, and can often impact us negatively. We're faced daily with countless opportunities of speaking Lashon Hara. The tongue is the fastest moving organ. And so Lashon Hara is one of the sins, one of the things, the problems that we commit most frequently. Kings David and Solomon knew this very well, which is why they wrote so much about it. The teachings in the Psalms are very clear. In Psalms 34, 12 to 14, who is the man who longs for life, who longs for many days to see good? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. Psalms 141:3 says, set, O Lord, a guard over my mouth. Keep watch at the door of my lips. In Proverbs, we also find wise quotes, such as in chapter 21, verse 23. He who keeps his mouth and his tongue keeps his soul from trouble. Proverbs 13:3 says, whoever guards his mouth guards his life. Whoever opens his lips seeks his ruin. Proverbs 15:4, a kind tongue is a tree of life. A perverse tongue harms the spirit. Proverbs 18:21 says, death and life are in the power of the tongue, and whoever loves her will eat her fruits. So what then can we do? Well, it's our choice to act or speak positively or negatively. It depends upon us. When our actions are directed toward kindness, sharing, and generosity, we are feeding our bodies with positive sustenance. The moment our actions are focused upon greed, selfishness, and insensitivity, we have opened the door to negativity. It says in the Kabbalah that as we remove negativity from our lives, the doors to the blessings of abundance and prosperity open. The importance of this Parashat Metzorah is to learn that we need to change negative actions, negative thoughts, and negative words for positive ones, to turn Lashon Hara into praise, into Lashon HaTov, the good tongue, to give positive and encouraging words to each other. According to Maimonides, praising a person is part of the precept, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. As we approach Pesach, the festival to remember our liberation, may this parasha teach us first to know, then to distinguish, and finally to break the chains of whatever imprisons us. As it is written in our prophet Malachi, let us distance ourselves from anything that hinders us from being in close contact with our Borei Olam. Let us work to change our way of speaking, to develop the habit of detecting, rejecting, and discarding what is not the good from our vocabulary. Let us dare to break with the structures that inhibit us, that hold us back, so that we may recognize ourselves as active and responsible individuals, capable of searching for whatever gives meaning to our lives. Let us be aware that we are imperfect and that we need to immerse ourselves in the stories, the parables, and the principles of the Torah. No one is exempt from committing errors like Lashon Hara, but our God is always willing to allow us to get closer to Him when we want it with all our hearts by doing teshuvah daily. Shabbat Shalom.